Good afternoon, everyone. Hope all is well. So, today our live session covers a London property developer by the name of Christian Halberg, who has done quite a few developments in London. And he's going to be joining us in just a moment. Luxury homes, hope all is well. Um, If anyone's got any questions regarding property development, do put them on here. It would be great to have some comments. Christian,
Hello, I'm Murtaza.
how are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. How are you?
Good, good, all is well. Thank you so much for turning up on the live. The whole reason for me to do this is to share knowledge and positivity during these times and to highlight your career as to what you do, how you do it, and so forth. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Really
Thank you for the
appreciate you
invitation.
coming on.
Absolutely. Yeah, honored
Is
to be here.
this your first live that you're doing?
It is, yes.
Good stuff, good stuff,
I'm not a massive Instagram user, so this is all new to me. So
good
it's
stuff.
thank you for showing me how this works.
You put your expertise into something else, which is property development. This is more for people like myself who use social media to show our presence, to create a digital brand, all that kind of stuff. So it's good to have people like yourself to come here and share that knowledge, which then increases the brand awareness of my company and London as itself, like why people should invest here, why people should develop here, all that kind of stuff. So once again, thank you for turning up. Before we start, Christian, if you can introduce yourself as to who you are and what you do, and then we can get the conversation going.
Yeah, sure. It's a long story, but I'll keep it as brief as possible. So myself, in my current guise, I'm a property developer. Have been for about 5 years now here in the UK. I can tell you more about my background if it's interesting later on. But
Absolutely.
at this point, what I would say is we are, as I say, property developers. We focus on residential developments in
Okay.
London. We are a reasonably new company. We're called Reach Living. You can find us on LinkedIn and social media. And we focus predominantly on exciting new neighborhoods that are appealing for first-time buyers and people just making their first step up on the property ladder. So uh, I, I would resist the urge to use the word affordable housing because I mean it's such a relative term, but
Yeah,
we're certainly not the developers that look to do very sort of ultra luxury, premium that only appeal to a certain segment. We believe there's a huge shortage of quality affordable housing
of course.
in the UK, in London especially, and that's something we're trying to help address in our own small
So
way.
your developments are basically appealing to anyone who is either a first-time buyer or possibly wants to move home and buy a second home, or an investor who wants to invest and rent those property out. So those are the sort of people that you aim at in terms of selling your properties. It's good to know that. Um, did you always think that you wanted to become a property developer? Or you had other aspirations in mind while you were at university or college or school? People, I dreamt of becoming a doctor or an architect. What sort of aspirations did you have in mind when you were growing up?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you asked me this question at a very interesting part of my life. I mean, I think, so the short answer to your question is no, I didn't dream of becoming a property developer. Um, my what set me on the journey to becoming a property developer, as I mentioned, which I have been doing for about 5 years now. So about 5 years ago, I was living in Singapore.
Okay.
I had just come out of finishing an MBA program, so a
Okay.
master's degree in business.
Okay.
Um, I originally took the master's degree in, so MBA is a fantastic way to really, or at least my experience and those of my friends and such, it's a great way to sort of, if you're able to do one, I would recommend doing it because it allows you just to pause in life and to have classmates from all around the world with very open-minded and from all sorts of walks of life, different careers, different career trajectories,
Yep.
and it exposes you to new ideas and new concepts that perhaps you just weren't exposed to before. So it really opens your horizons.
You make a good point over here. You studied MBA, right?
Mm.
And for someone like me, for example, I did my undergraduate in business, but then I thought that doing my master's is not possibly going to get me anywhere because the fact is university does not teach you experience.
Yeah,
University teaches you studies of how to use those studies in your professional life, it may be. But my psychology is such that if you want to do business, you got to get into the field and do business because you can't learn business, right? You can't learn profit and loss and all that kind of stuff. You got to do
yeah.
it. You got to do the numbers. Like you're a property developer, Chris. So um, you must be putting in your numbers into an Excel sheet or a calculator and all that kind of stuff, and then making that property development work for yourself and your company to profit from it, right? So it's an interesting point where you mentioned, I think you're the first person to come on here and mention that it's good to have that background in business so that you can apply that into your field. It's good to know that.
I think you've hit on a super important point, and I totally subscribe to your viewpoint, which is if nothing beats the school of hard knocks, nothing
Of course.
beats going out there, getting the experience. If you have that drive, that energy, and that direction, um, definitely don't do an MBA. It isn't just do the business, right? Just get it done.
So where
If
do
you
you
have
stand,
that,
Christian? Do you recommend someone to do their MBA or you don't recommend someone to do their MBA?
all I can say is my own personal experience, which was if I look at where I am today compared to potentially where I would have been if I hadn't have done an MBA. I think the MBA for me personally was a great way for me to shift direction to a completely different direction that I never would have considered had I not done it.
Got you.
So yes, I benefited from it. But like you said, if you know what you want to do and you have the drive and the energy, just do it. Don't waste your time with further education. Just go and do it. Yeah. Hustle, that's the name of the game.
Um, so were you always into this business field? It'd be property or it'd be whatever, were you always driven towards doing business and setting up your own business? I mean, before doing the MBA and before doing property development, were you working for another company or if you can shed some light on that?
Sure. Yes, I've always been focused on business, but the type of business has shifted a little bit, and I think it's shifted to the point now where I've finally found a niche that fits my personality, and because I started off my career in banking, in commercial
Okay,
banking.
okay.
So I did that for about 7 or 8 years here in
And that
London.
was that was in Singapore?
No, that was here in London.
That was in London. Okay.
Yeah. So in a way, I think that the benefit of the banking, it gave me a solid background in finance, clearly, but it also exposed me because some of my clients back then happened to be real estate developers. It didn't click at the time, but I
Okay.
guess something must have stayed with me from that experience that has sort of led me back to that path of property development.
And were you with one bank this whole time for the 7 or 8 years, or you shifted banks?
I, I make a horrible employee. I'm terrible. Really, if I had to hire myself, I don't know how long I would last in a role. I am too stubborn, and I always think I know the right thing, I'm so no. I shifted. I think I had 3 or 4 jobs within 7 or 8 years in
Wow.
banking.
And they were
So
and they were all in different banks.
all in different banks. Yeah.
Can you name a few?
Yeah, I mean, so I started off in RBS. So
Okay.
this was back in the days when RBS was, um, before a lot of the troubles hit. So it was quite an exciting bank to be working with. I actually started off in the call center at RBS.
Okay.
So the call center that I was working at, our role was to try and sell loans to individuals, and it wasn't a very pleasant job, and
It doesn't happen anymore, right?
I
No
don't
one
think it
sells
does, to be
loans.
honest. No, thankfully, thankfully. And I had an epiphany because there was one I still vividly remember. There was, and this is going back, 15 or so years ago. I still remember this call so clearly. It was a lovely old lady, and you know, she was obviously a client of a customer of RBS, so we had access to her bank account details. We could see her affordability, and it was an outbound call. So I was calling her and asking her if she wanted some extra borrowing, and I could see her finances, and I just thought, what am I doing trying to sell a loan to this lovely old lady? It's just not right. It's just not right. So that was kind of a turning point for me. And then from there, I uh, somehow managed to jump across to a different division within RBS, which was the corporate banking division,
Okay.
which was much more in tune with sort of my personality. So
Yep.
corporate banking, as you probably know, is you manage a small portfolio of corporate clients. Usually you work in pairs. You have the senior guy and the junior guy. I was the junior guy, of course,
Okay.
and you manage the banking needs and requirements of, say, okay, so about 20 corporate clients, whether that's overdraft facilities, lending facilities.
And these corporate clients, what sort of funds are they sitting on?
The
What
ones we
what defines a corporate client?
Yeah, so the way RBS defined it back then, you had three different tiers of commercial banking. You had the smaller SME, small and medium-sized
Yep. Yep.
enterprises. Those tended to have a turnover. I'll probably get this wrong, but let's just say they had a turnover up to £1 million a year, right? So they would be classed as the sort of like the smaller ones. I
Yep.
wasn't in that department. I was in the mid corporate.
Mid
So
corporate.
so
So
the way
million
to
to 10 million, something like that.
something like a bit more like, so basically anything, so larger than the small corporates we talked about just now, but smaller than the big boys, the blue
Yep.
chips, the
Yep.
PLCs.
Yep. Yep.
That's kind
Yep.
of where mid corporates sat. So it could be anything up to turnover of a few £100 million. So still
Wow.
sizable companies, but also they could be, just above the threshold for, the smaller ones. So maybe 10 million to 100 or 200 million turnover.
So you've always been in this commercial and corporate banking sector. What was more intense, the commercial banking side or the corporate banking side?
Oh, definitely the commercial bank. The colleagues that I knew in who were dealing with commercial banking. So I mentioned to you just now, we had a portfolio of about, let's say, 20 clients.
Yep.
On the commercial side, a relationship manager, as they were called, would manage anywhere up to 100 or 200 clients because
Okay.
they're all these small businesses.
Yep.
So super intense. Whereas where we were, it was intense, but a different type of intense. You got to know your clients much better.
Okay.
You got to wine and dine them. Back then you had an expense card, and so you take them out on fancy dinners and
Golfing clubs and all that kind of
that
stuff.
sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And you mentioned that you shifted through four banks and stuff. Which bank was the most intense? Or you went to RBS. Which were the other three that you went to?
yeah, so well, I guess this is public knowledge. It's like so. The next bank I went to was a division of Clydesdale Bank,
Okay.
which is part of an Australian group.
Yep.
There, I I only lasted 6 months in that one because uh, I think the best and most diplomatic way to put it was there was
You
a
were not
person.
employable. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. We'll go with that. So, but
Um,
to be honest, I mean, rather than focus on the banking career, because it is an important part of my background. I think the next jump is to sort of bring out, if I may, Murtaza. So
yep.
after the MBA, so the interesting thing with the MBA was I wanted to transition from corporate banking
Can I just ask,
which
why did you choose to do the MBA in Singapore rather than the UK?
so it's a good question. At the time, the UK was just coming out of the financial
Recession.
recession. So this was around about sort of 2012. And things were slowly picking up, but banking was a little bit sort of stagnant in those years.
Yep.
So it was a good opportunity. I'm actually half Singaporean. So for me, it was
I
partly
thought
to
I thought from the facial
the look, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So it was, of course, there's that as well. But also, Singapore it's an exciting place
it's a
to live.
it's one of the
Financial hub.
financial hub also in the southeast. So I'm sure, that must have intrigued you. And plus, being from Singaporean background, it must have been
Yeah.
easier for you to sort of adjust in there. And um, a lot of Asians, Indians, Pakistanis do also go and study in Singapore. I've had a few friends, cousins who've sort of, rather than coming to the West, have traveled to the Southeast to get their further education. It'd be technology, it'd be business like yourself, all that kind of stuff. So once you studied your MBA, and then were you in that moment after graduating that what now, what's next, or you already had that plan that, yep, property is the sector I'm getting into?
No, not at all. Like, so that's the interesting thing. Like, so I was in corporate banking pre-MBA. I took the MBA actually originally my intention was to transition into investment banking,
Okay,
right? Because that's the sexy job, that's the one that pays the big bucks, that's the one where you
absolutely.
drive the fast
Big
cars, all that sort
bonuses,
of
yep,
nonsense.
yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
right? The beauty and what I tried to allude to earlier, the beauty about an MBA is if you're lucky, your classmates come from all walks of life, and in my case, some of them were coming from an investment banking background, trying to transition out of investment banking. So it was so valuable just to talk to these guys and just really hear the true story of what actually investment banking is all about. You see the sexy side of things, but what's the day to day? What's the stresses?
The
What's the
intense
the
pressure and all
intense
that kind of
pressure?
stuff. Yep, yep.
And that made me realize, whoa, hang on, maybe this isn't for me, investment banking. This isn't this
So
isn't for
that
me.
just changed your whole perspective of getting in there, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it totally flipped my trajectory from investment banking, and at that same time, I was super lucky that I during the MBA I discovered this thing called entrepreneurship. I met a couple of really smart engineers, and the four of us actually, we formed a startup um, trying to develop a medtech device.
Okay.
And that was such an amazing experience. Again, that's a whole different story we can touch on another time. But through that experience, I met, or we were talking to a lot of venture capital, VC
Funds,
funds.
yep, yep, yep.
And it just so happened that one of those VC funds that I was speaking to, after I graduated from the MBA, they hired me. So my first role out of MBA was to work in as a VC investor for
Yep,
startups in Singapore.
got you. And these VC funds, they would go out and invest in anything, or I mean, it'd be technology, it'd be property, it'd be hotels, all that kind of stuff. Was it a broad investment sector that they had, or no, they were just focused on something very
The
narrow?
one the ones we were speaking to were all investing in tech. I mean, that
Okay,
was the underlying thing. But whether the tech was, clean tech, med tech, software as a service, the whole thing. The
got you.
VC fund that I ended up working for was what you call sector agnostic. So
Okay.
we invested in, renewables, med tech, you name it. We didn't really mind too much what the sector was as long as the business made money.
As long as it made profit.
Exactly.
And then from there, I believe you transitioned on to property development.
Yeah, so that's where it started to get interesting. So I did VC investing for about 2 years, and
Okay.
it was an amazing experience. And really, the coolest thing about being
Did
in
it
a
pay
VC,
well in comparing banking to VC fund? Did it pay well, and the pressure and the intense focus on clients and managing the investments, all that kind of stuff? Which one was better, do you think, working for a VC fund or working for a bank?
Okay, so there's a multiple ways of answering that question, and to be honest, the answer is no, it didn't pay well. I mean, it paid reasonably well, like, there was no issues on that, but I think because of, where I was in terms of the food chain with the VC fund, coming into it, quite new, um, my sort of negotiating power for, because I think where you make a lot of money as a VC investor is if some of the bets that you place turn out to be successful and you get a cut of that return, then your returns can be astronomical, particularly if you're like in the valley, Silicon Valley or places like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
where
yeah.
with us we weren't remunerated in that way. We were just paid a salary, which absolutely was a great salary, but there was no upside,
Oh,
massive
okay, so there
upside
were no
potential.
commissions, bonuses, all that kind of stuff. It was just a fixed salary and that was it.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Whereas in
yeah.
investment banking, you would get those commissions and bonuses if the investment or whatever went well in the investment banking. Um, and then after venture capitalism.
Yeah, I guess this is going back to about 5 years ago. I was around 35 at the time, 34, 35. I'm approaching 40 now, and I was sort of
Still
I had
looking well, Chris.
yeah, the gray hairs are getting thicker and thicker, unfortunately.
40
Uh,
is the new 40 is the new 20.
so yeah, I kind of sat down when I was like, and it's good you raised the question about remuneration and such, and I kind of like I had a lot of ambition. I've always had this ambition and drive within me to get things done and to to make
Good
a name
point.
for.
What drives you?
Hmm. Oof, that's also, I mean, this conversation, you could have me talking for hours, but okay, I guess if you really condensed it down,
This is about sharing positivity. So people need to know what, like the other time I had someone and they said there always has to be a why in why you do it.
yeah,
So you've spoken about something driving you, right? So what
yeah,
drives you towards getting where you want or
I would
towards getting where you wanted to at that point?
I would say there's two things that drive me. One is a positive and one is a negative. All right. I'll start with the negative first because I prefer
Yeah.
to end on the positive. So on the negative, like, and this is a very personal story to me, but I don't mind sharing it. So
Yep.
one of the role models in my life is my father, like my dad. Like I look up to him a lot, and he
Everyone,
achieved a lot of great things in business. A lot of people do,
of
right?
course.
And he was working for one company his entire career, which was quite common, I guess, back in the previous
Same here.
generations,
Same
right?
here.
Yeah. And he worked for this company. He gave his the company was part of his identity because he was working there for 40 years, and
Yep.
he rose the ranks. It started off as a small company. Now it's a huge, like, global company. And just before retirement, there was one guy who was his senior, like, or whatever. And again, there was a personality conflict. And as a result, long story short, my dad took early retirement. It was kind of, it wasn't really a choice, but more of a, it,
He didn't want to do it, but he had to do it.
yeah, it was like a golden handshake,
Okay.
right? And I saw that, and it sort of like, my dad is a very strong person, but it really, really affected him, and that made me think, wow, there's no security,
Yep.
if you work in a career all your life, even if you dedicate your whole life to one company, this can still happen. I can't let this happen to me. So that's the negativity that drives me to want to do my own thing.
We share the same, I swear, we share the same.
Really?
Of course, my father, same year. He's worked with the same company 40 years of his life, selling insurance. It's a big company in Pakistan, the top insurance company in Pakistan. He still works there, but I have seen him escalating. And now he's at a point where there's no escalation and it's just stagnant,
Yeah.
and he's coming up to retirement. And I've seen how, it's like football, right? New players come in.
Yep.
The old
Yep.
players can't run the
Yep.
90 yards or the 100 yards like they could
Yep.
back in the days. And it needs change, right? And I don't blame the company for it. But the fact is that you do feel you do have that negative in you that now I'm not needed. And
Yeah.
this is the exact
Mm.
why in my life that I don't want to be that person. I
Yes.
don't I would love to be like my father, how he's looked after his family, my mother, his kids, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing I don't want to copy him in is getting employed by someone for 40 years and then them turning around and saying, just
Yeah.
holding their hands up, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
Oh,
it's
that's
the
awesome.
same analogy that we share. So what's the positive?
So the positive, right? So, and that's an awesome. Thanks for sharing that, by the way, Mr. Hazard. That's awesome that we share
It's
that. That's quite
absolutely,
special. Um,
absolutely.
on the positive, yeah. So I have a big belief in environmentalism, in sort of like climate change. It's something that concerns me,
Of course.
and what originally started off as oh how it's just seeing all the destruction in the world and the environment and such and so forth. I thought, how can I make a positive change to this? And that's kind of where after a lot of like soul searching, real estate development and climate change can be interlinked if you really think about it, because one of the largest contributors to CO2 emissions is the built environment. It
Yep,
is by necessity. Cement production, the way we manufacture and
yep,
produce homes and such. So why not make it a positive and say, well, why don't we adopt environmental sustainable practices when we build homes? We all need homes. Why
of
not
course.
just make them in an environmental way? So that's kind of a nascent thought in my mind at the moment. And to be honest, we're not at this. We're quite a new company, so I'm not here. Our green credentials
Yep.
are there yet, but that's kind of the direction we want to head towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so how are you applying climate change within the property development sector? I've never heard anyone say this, but how are you applying both of them together? Are you doing something like solar power panels up in your developments, or are you reusing the water that is, the rainwater and all that kind of stuff? How are you applying that to save the world?
Yeah, I mean, save the world is obviously it's a big it's a big statement, and I hope.
Everyone's doing their part, right?
Right, right. But I mean, and it also depends on the type of project that we work on. I mean, but it doesn't have to be revolutionary or mind-blowing stuff. It can be just the simple stuff like, constructing using, double glazed or triple glazed windows,
Yep,
insulation, uh, making sure that it's built to a certain quality. Off-site manufacturing is something that we're looking at as well, like where things are manufactured in a factory environment. So the seals, the accuracy level of the build is much more. It's done
and
in a much.
do you go to Europe to find these manufactured products, or you go to China or Southeast Asia to get these?
So I mentioned I'm half Singaporean. My other half is Danish. So I'm part of the Scandinavian sort of like mindset of using sustainable building materials such as timber,
Yep.
building good quality that lasts, that is, that has a very good sort of like, that it's done in a very sustainable way. So these sort of things. But in terms of the building materials, yeah, I mean, that's something we leave to our
Construct
contractors to do.
Contractors. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned that you got into property development around 5 years ago, right?
Yes, yes.
How easy was it for you to find your first site? And how hard was it to get the planning that you wanted for that first site to generate the profit that you thought that you're going to make?
Yeah, so this is an interesting story, how I started off in property development. So okay, so how it all began was I was living in Singapore. I had this, thing a few years ago that I wanted to transition, and I decided property development. Let's just fast forward that. So then I moved back to London from Singapore, right? 5 years ago. So, okay, I came back here. I didn't really have any networks, any contacts in real estate. I just knew I wanted to do it, right? So, you know, I struggled. Where do you start? Like,
Yep.
I don't have any capital. I don't have any knowledge. I don't have any contacts. It's tough to break into property development without any of these things.
Of course.
How I started off isn't exactly how I ended up, which is in a way a good thing. How I started off was I started going to these property
Networking events.
education networking events. Exactly right. You know the ones, right? I don't need to mention them.
I've been to many of those, been to all these. Yeah, I've checked them all out. But
Yeah,
now for me, networking is like doing it this way, doing it on
yeah,
social media. For me, rather than going to a social networking event where I have 50 people to speak to, and not one of them has
yeah,
my full attention,
yeah.
I rather speak to one person at one
Yes.
given time, and we have 100% of that attention. That's more for me rather than going to any of these PNIs and BNIs and all that kind of stuff, you
Yes,
know.
yes, yes. I exactly agree with you. I think those suit a certain type of individual and a certain type of ambition, but it's not for everyone, should we say,
Yeah,
right? So,
of course.
so that kind of led me down a little bit of a dead end for a few months because, whilst it was good, I met a lot of interesting people. I still am in touch with some of them today.
Yep.
My first step into property development was to form a little JV with a builder,
Okay.
and the two of us, would jump in his car or my car, and we would just drive around looking for sites. I mean, we didn't have a clue. We didn't know how to raise capital. We didn't know. I mean, he obviously knew a lot about the building industry. I mean, he's been doing it for 30 years. Very experienced guy. Um, really cool guy. I still keep in touch with him. But yeah, I mean, the long and the short of it was we didn't know what we were doing. You know.
Yep.
At the same time, I did luck out a little bit because my Singapore network came in handy here because there was a Singaporean that I knew back in Singapore, and she knew a friend here in London, Singaporean guy, who was a developer. So she introduced the two of us, and we kind of hit it off after a few meetings. And
Okay.
pretty soon he said, "Why don't you come and join us? We're starting a small development company. There's four of us. You'll be the first employee. Are you interested?" I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. So,
Okay.
so I went and worked for those guys for about a year or two. Um, and during that time, oh my, I mean, that was
And it was for them, it was you were working as someone to find them sites and all that kind of stuff to build
everything,
out. Okay.
everything. And it was, I mean, the advantage of working there was there were four senior partners, and all four had their own speciality. Particularly, there was one guy um, who was a property developer for 30 or 40 years, and he's done some mega projects. Wealth of knowledge, just picking things up,
All
watching
over
how
the
he,
world, I guess, right?
well, predominantly in the UK, predominantly
Okay.
in the UK,
Okay.
and just watching how he sort of spoke to people, how he, guided things, how he got planning permission, how he guided the architects, how he found sites. I mean, it was just such a steep learning curve, but it was, and what's funny is, within sort of the first few months of working there, bear in mind I had no clue about property development at that point. Uh, because the four of them were busy doing their own things, by default, I kind of ended up managing these projects that so that, for example, there was one site that they bought, which they were trying to get planning for 130 flats,
Wow.
and there was just take it and run with it. No, there was no one there to sort of hold my hand and say, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that." It's just deal with it, just get it done. Uh, intense, intense, intense. And then there was another project a few months later, which was even bigger. That was for
Sure.
600 units.
Wow. And
Huge,
these
huge
were all
sites
these were all London based or around the UK?
around the UK, around the UK, and it was just a case of sink or swim.
So did you
Like
have to go for site visits and all that kind of stuff
everything.
and give them updates, speak to the council, planning department, all that. So it basically helped you in setting up what you decided that you wanted to do.
Yes,
So you
yeah,
found that ground to to sort of lay your foundations and learn each and everything
Yeah.
what these guys taught you from their experience from the company and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure, and plus being Singaporean, working with the Singaporean owners must have been easier for you to settle in and to understand everything. Obviously, no language barrier and all that kind of stuff. So it must have been amazing for you
Yeah, it
to
was. It
learn.
was. I mean, look, it wasn't fun and games. It was, 7 days a week, 10, 15 hours a day, like that kind of. It was intense. It was probably the most intense period of work in my life.
But do
Um,
you think that's paid off now?
I mean, I tell you, it's for anybody who wants to, who's thinking about getting into property development. You know, if I can offer some advice, it would be, you know, learn by doing, and learn by seeing other people do it, because it's there's such an art to. I mean, product development is it on the paper it's very easy to say, oh, I build houses and hit the spreadsheet and it all works, but there's a real art to it, like understanding how to how to find sites in good areas. What is the end buyer looking for in a flat, how to design it, what type of architects you should be speaking to, what type of investors you should, I mean, there's a million shades of gray,
Of
in
course,
this,
of
so
course.
it's something that, I mean, if you're sort of like risk taker, by all means go for it on your own. But if you're the type that wants to just, like I am, that wants to just have a little bit of a foundation, like
Yeah.
somehow getting that experience is invaluable.
So it's always best to, if you're going to end up being a property developer,
Yeah.
work for a property developer and get that
Yes.
experience and then
Yes.
start up
Yes.
your
Yes.
own.
Yes.
So how did you start up your own firm?
So, I mean, that was kind of so. So that company, it was 5 people when I joined. A couple of other guys joined. 2 or 3 others. It wasn't a huge company, um, and one of my colleagues in that company, Singaporean guy as well. He and I like became fast friends and stuff, and the two of us branched out and started what is today Reach Living, which is our own company. So
Got you.
we were colleagues in that previous development company, and
Yeah.
we
And now
started
you're
our own thing.
partners.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So how was it finding your first site, your
Hmm.
actual first site?
A lot of disappointments, a lot of near misses or near hits, I should say. A lot of times where we found an amazing site and we were so excited, but by the time we put an offer in, it had gone, or we couldn't raise the capital. Other times, there was just we just couldn't find any decent sites, and
Was it hard to raise the capital? I mean, a lot of property developers these days, either who are starting up or even experienced property developers, they sort of run out of cash or run out of capital. How
yeah.
easy is it to find that capital?
Huh. Your first deal is always the hardest, always. As far as I can tell, and the few people that I've spoken to, it's always the hardest because somebody has to believe in you enough to write a big check, you
Of
know?
course.
And especially if you don't have a track record, it's a question that often comes up if you're new in the industry. We still get it. What's your track record? What have you done? Show us some exits. And if you can't answer that question, the more risk averse investors tend to just walk away. They're like, you come back to us in a couple of years once
Once you've
because
got
they
experience, yep.
exactly, and you can understand the mindset. They don't want to risk their capital on some team that's unproven.
Of course.
Even though you have like previous experience working for a development company. So yeah, the first deal is always the toughest one. But once you've got that track record, and hopefully you've done a good job the first one, that investor maybe reinvests with you, or he tells his friends, and then
And then you
it's
get you
slowly
get so
sort of
it's sort of
builds. Yeah,
the river starts flowing then, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Slowly. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a river, but like definitely becomes a stream first. Yeah,
Good stuff. Um,
yeah.
so how many property developments have you so far completed in this whole span?
Yeah, so us as Reach, we've been in business for about just over a year, and we are coming to a close on our second one. We are actually fundraising at the moment for an amazing development in Hackney. So we're in that stage now where we're trying to raise funds. We've raised a little bit.
So anyone listening who wants to partner up with Chris,
Please reach
JV,
out to me. Yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
yes, yes, yes.
What sort of capital are you looking for, and what sort of returns?
Yeah, so we're looking to raise about 1.25 to £1.5 million.
Okay,
So this is for a site in Hackney, amazing location. It has planning permission for 7 flats. So the business model on this particular project is simply just to buy it, build it, sell it, simple
okay.
as. Um,
So
so
you're not holding, or you're not going to uh, rent the properties out. You're just going to build it out and sell it out.
yeah, I mean, so what we find with this, you know, you're right. I mean, the business model is to sell it by default, but some investors might come in and say, well, actually, do you mind if instead I just keep one of the units and
Gotcha.
just, you know,
Rent
so
it out.
of
Yep.
course that's no problem, you know, but the default is to sell them out, but some investors might prefer to sort of,
And what
you
sort
know,
of returns are you giving them on that JV that they raise for you
yeah, so we're looking at a return on equity of above 30% for 1 year.
for 1 year?
That's sort of, yeah,
Wow.
for 1 year. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So anyone who's looking to get into the JV, make a 30% out, get in touch with Christian. Um, and now, how are you adopting yourself with all this
Yeah.
lockdown, COVID, all this kind of stuff in terms of your development? Was there a hit that you had to take in these 2 months? It'd be construction workers, or it'd be working from home, or, laying off a few people. How did you sort of carry yourself on from the 2 months that we were in lockdown to now, how we are going to be, as people call it, the new normal? How are you adopting
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's 2 months, but the world has changed in 2 months. It's quite amazing, and I think yeah, I mean, we definitely have been affected like everybody else. I mean, two examples. One is on a site that we were trying to sell. You know, it's proven difficult to. I mean, we had offers agreed, but now things are just stalling. Um, you know, on the other site that we're working on at the moment, we're coming to a close. That should have actually completed end of April. We had at one point 12 guys on site working full steam ahead. We were down to two during the lockdown period.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's obviously impacted the sort of like the
Progress and
build
completion.
program.
Yep.
But to give credit to my build team, those guys they worked throughout the lockdown, and now that things are sort of unlocking or slowly,
Yep.
you know, um, they're trying to
Opening
just
up. Yep.
yeah get things done as quickly as they can without rushing, you know. So I really respect the builders for the job they've done, and you know, like I
That's
say, within a couple of weeks, that one should be done.
that's great.
Yeah.
What's your ideal development scheme?
The one we're raising for at the moment.
Good answer. Good answer. Uh, Before I wrap up this conversation, I always ask my guests to share some positive. I know this whole live has been about you sharing your positiveness and advices and everything, but something at the final stage of this conversation, what advice would you like to share, or positivity that you would like to share with all the people that are around, possibly listening right now? They may come back and listen to the stream at a later stage because it's always on my profile. There's a lot of negativity around, with COVID, with lockdown, unemployment, redundancies,
Yeah.
furloughs, um, George Floyd,
Yeah.
all this
Yeah.
stuff that's going around us, and it sets people back. It's nature.
Yeah.
When a human sees negativity in front of them, it impacts them as well. And it's not easy to come out of that negativity with something positive. How would you advise them to leave that negativity behind and move and achieve your goals, doing something positive in life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Murtaza. I think, I mean, I don't know if I'm the right person to to
Everyone's
have,
the right person.
but what I
in
would
their
say,
in their in their in their own shoes. Everyone's the right person. I don't care. You may
Okay.
be Bill Gates, or you may
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
Christian Halberg. Everyone can give advice, especially on my platform.
Definitely. I mean, yeah. What I would say is there's the old sort of Chinese proverb that I really think is relevant in this age. I mean, for sure that we're in a very volatile world, and you look around you and you usually think where are things going? But this Chinese proverb I think is very relevant, which is within crisis there's always opportunity,
Of course.
and it's just a case of changing your mindset instead of focusing on this things are so bad. Maybe it's more profitable and more positive to think about, well, okay, this is the way the world is going. There's nothing I can do to change that. What can I do to what opportunities will arise out of this new world that's coming our way?
Absolutely.
That would be my sort of my take on it. Yeah.
What sort of opportunities are you looking for yourself right now in life and personal life and business life, whatever?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it revolves around real estate,
Apart
right?
from property development side.
Probably so. Yeah, oh, that's a good question. I think, like I'm a big believer in personal development, whether that's reading books, expanding your knowledge.
Of course.
I believe a lot in keeping a sort of like healthy body, healthy mind sort of thing. So, whether that's exercising or speaking to friends, just keep things, it's very easy to see the negative in life, but why not see the positive as well, and
Of course.
share that positivity with friends, and reach out to people. I mean, we've never been in a more connected world than we are today. Look at us here.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, doing these lives with, I mean, I've done like 80 or 82 lives now, and I wouldn't have thought about
wow.
doing this 6 months ago. But like
Okay.
you mentioned, these 2 months just changed how I see things and how I want to share positive energy with people all around the world. And that's why I started these, being in the property sector and all that. There is only enough of properties that one can sell. But what else I can sell, or not sell, but just give away for free, is positive advice from people like yourself. Sometimes I think that people might not believe me in whatever I want to share, but the
Hmm.
guests that I bring on here, they will listen to them because they're all in their own field. They've all sort of mastered their field in terms of it be property development, it be FX trading, or it be a musician, it be an actor, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So it's great to have people like yourself. So I thank you for coming on and sharing your experience, your career, of how you got into property development. There are a lot of people asking these days. They have the same aspiration as well, that they want to be a real estate developer in London or around the world, anything like that, but they don't know how to start. Before I go, there are two questions here. What would you say are the best opportunities for a small starting out developer?
One of the best opportunities. Okay. I think one of the, I don't want to say easiest because nothing is easy in property development. There's a
Of
lot of
course.
risk, but one of the more straightforward uh, deals. So the first deal that we did, like one of the early deals that we did was to find a big house or a house, get planning permission to split it into flats and just do the work of
Gotcha.
splitting it into flats. It's quite a um, the art of, going back to what I was saying earlier, there is an art in property development. Understanding how planning works in particular boroughs is vital, and also seeing if there's any precedents. Like, so for example, you found a house. Are there any neighboring streets that have got planning permission to split into flats? That's it's
Or maybe that street itself could have
maybe
houses
exactly. Yeah.
with flats in them.
Yeah.
But this is how a lot of property developers start as well. They buy a house, either they turn it into a luxury house,
Hmm.
or either they convert it into three, four flats, whatever, and
Hmm.
then bring it onto the market, either rent it or sell it. But that's how I think most of the stories that I've heard in terms of property development, that's
Yeah.
how property developers have started and gone on to becoming something building like 7, 8 units and then 100
Yeah.
units. And then, so I
Yeah.
wish you
Yeah.
all the best. And I'm sure that one day I'll hear your story of you building 100 unit plus development in London or the UK or anywhere around the world. Like you mentioned, the world's now this small. You can get
Yeah.
anywhere and everywhere. So thank you so much, Christian, for turning up and sharing all this knowledge that you've shared. I mean, a lot of property developers also, I don't think it's been so intense and positive with so many other property developers that I've had, like I've had it with you. So thank you so much. And hopefully I would be looking forward to doing business with you in terms of selling
Absolutely.
you sites and selling your property developments and possibly raising a JV. Like Christian mentioned, if anyone's interested in doing a JV with
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
contact him. Captive8 is user ID on Instagram. Check it out.
Yeah, but just on that point, I'm
Sure.
not so active on Instagram, so LinkedIn is the best way to reach me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Murtaza, thank you so much
Perfect.
for your time.
Thank
It's
you
been a
so
real
much,
pleasure. I'm
Christian.
sure we'll speak soon.
Absolutely. Take care,
Take care.
Christian.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. So that was Christian Halberg, London-based property developer who has experienced a lot of stuff over time, like he mentioned in this live, discussing his journey from being commercial banker to an investment banker to a VC fund employee and now a property developer in London. So check this live. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how people go from one career to another to find the right career that they want to. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you to Christian for tuning in and all the viewers that tuned in today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great day. Enjoy whatever you're doing. And BTH Properties, if you're looking to buy, sell, or rent properties in London, in the UK, get in touch. Thank you so much. Bye bye.